Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com, recruiting analyst, co-host of the Bearcast with Craig that comes out every Tuesday, joins us. Normally Friday, but another nice weekend for Baylor, and maybe more news to come as well, plus Austin Novosad headed to the Elite 8, Elite 11, and other news. Grayson, thanks for jumping back on with us again. So they seem to have had a nice run. And I saw a couple of things you put out yesterday about this class, how it's shaping up. Your thoughts about what they've done to this point, and then we'll get into the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you kind of look at the grand scheme of things, they've done a really nice job of adding these guys kind of at the same time. You know, you look at Sean Tompkins, big offensive lineman from out of state. They've done a really nice job there when you think about, you know, the fact that they went out and got Tayshawn Wilson, and he's, you know, one of those high-profile guys at the cornerback position who can do a lot of things for your secondary. Carl Williams was kind of the first cornerback they were able to add. So, again, addressing the secondary, which they obviously need to add some bodies there. So I think they've done a really nice job this week. And obviously, when you look at where they're at 18 commits. So they've really built this class out very quickly. And this month of June has been one of those months that I've talked about a lot with y'all as being really important, and it's continued to be that way for this staff, as they've really, in my eyes, hit a home run in June. And as you mentioned, it's far from over. I think there are a lot of guys out there right now who Baylor has a great shot at landing and adding to this class. And honestly, as of right now, I think this class will probably be over 20 commits by the end of June.
Grayson, what's coming up this week that you expect to go down?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously a big part of news that I'm going to be working on is Austin Novosad at the Elite 11. So that's kind of one of the biggest storylines because, you know, I think you're going to see a lot of articles written. You're going to see a lot of talk about him, and you're going to see a lot of pictures of him. And I know everyone's going to be wondering, you know, is he going to be wearing a bunch of Baylor stuff? Is he going to be reaffirming his commitment the first day, or is he going to let things process a little bit longer since he got his Texas A&M offer this past week? So that's a big storyline that I'm obviously following. A couple other ones, I was able to talk to Ridgepoint defensive lineman who I think projects to a nose tackle at the next level in DK Kalu. He's getting ready to announce the decision in the next day. So I think tomorrow is his decision date. So that's one to definitely keep an eye on. Baylor's done a great job recruiting him. Dennis Johnson and Juice Johnson have recruited him really, really hard, and they've made him a just major priority in this class. And currently they don't have anyone who projects as a nose tackle right now. So he would be an absolutely massive get if they were able to land him. Free State offensive lineman Calvin Clements, so he's out of Kansas. He took his official visit this weekend, and he's going to be announcing his top three tomorrow. Baylor will be inside that top three, and then he will be announcing his commitment later on this week. So another one to keep an eye on. I feel good about where Baylor is at right now. And I think a lot of people are starting to trend in Baylor's direction for the big tackle prospect. As far as everyone else, you know, I'm still keeping an eye on Colleen Ellison, defensive lineman Brendan Bett. I still think Baylor's in a great spot there, and I feel like, you know, he could make his decision or announcement in the next few days as well. So, again, Baylor just in a great spot right now. They're really rolling with a ton of confidence as June wraps up.
Grayson, I think we talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but obviously not everybody in this particular audience listens to that. A&M and the fact that they've now offered officially. I mean, Ohio State, you understand the reasons why to be concerned. It's Ohio State, and I know that A&M has history as well, but we've seen Baylor go toe-to-toe with A&M in the non-NIL era plenty of times and win battles, so that one doesn't, you know, typically just strike me as like, oh my gosh, A&M offered the same way Ohio State. But in this era, it is a little bit different. Does this NIL era matter in the recruitment of Austin Novosad, and how much does that A&M offer matter to Novosad in your opinion?
Yeah, so I guess let's start with the A&M part. You know, it typically does not matter a ton, but being that both of his parents went to Texas A&M, it makes it his quote-unquote dream offer. Gotcha. You know what I mean? Like if he were, you know, growing up and got the Texas A&M offer, that would be the one that he was always looking for. But there is a huge caveat to that, and it's that Texas A&M took forever to offer him. and they kind of strung him along. They offered other quarterbacks. They had Eli Holstein committed for a little bit, and they really just took their time. They had Austin on campus multiple times and never offered him. And so while, they turned back around and they offered him, I'm not sure that offer means quite as much as it would have if they would have offered much, much sooner. So I think he's going to consider A&M. I think, obviously growing up liking that program, that's a big deal. But right now, I still think there are some things that he needs to figure out on the A&M side as to, how much of a priority is he really to that Texas A&M coaching staff. And also, the other part that's been big during his recruitment is the depth charts at the places that he's looking at. And A&M's is very murky right now, with Connor Weidman being a high-profile target who is just one grade above him, and then also Haynes King as well, who's just one grade above him. So it's pretty loaded. They also have Max Johnson there as well. But, so the depth chart is a little murky. So I expect him to take a little bit of time and kind of examine that option a little bit further before I would say that A&M is a massive threat. I still think Ohio State and Baylor are right there. I think Baylor still has the lead right now. He's committed still. He's going into the Elite 11 committed. So I still think that's a great sign for Baylor. Now, as far as the NIL part, that's just not something that he's really mentioned at all. I think for him, I know when you go around and you look at the numbers that people are throwing out about some of these quarterbacks, when you're talking about Jaden Rashada at Miami, seeing that number is probably pretty ridiculous, but it's not something that Novosad has really brought up much during his recruitment. I think he's focused on other things before NIL, and he always has been. So I really don't expect NIL to play a big part in his recruitment just because it hasn't up to this point.
Grayson, I do want to get into the week that Texas has had since Arch Manning. We mentioned Arch Manning to you on Friday and what they've done. But I want to go back to where this class is now and who they might add if they can keep who they have now. We know they lost a young man from Lake Belton. But is this class, is there a possibility this is Baylor's best class?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, I posted a tweet that they haven't had a top 25 class since, I believe, 2014. And so it's been a long time. And that class finished 25th in the country. And I'm kind of looking at what Baylor's doing right now. Currently, they're number 10 in the nation. They just jumped USC last night, actually, when they got the news that Sean Tompkins was committing. So Baylor in a good spot right now. I think they have an outside shot at finishing in the top 20, but I definitely see the top 25 as a real possibility. And again, like I said, this would be the first time since 2014 and only the second time in the last 20 years. And that's just how far, 247 rankings go. But I can't imagine Baylor's had many top 25 classes before then either. So this would be a massive deal if Baylor's able to maintain somewhere close to their ranking. But again, I do think it'll be closer to, 2025, which is still a fantastic class in just Dave Aranda's third recruiting class since becoming the Baylor head coach.
Grayson, it seems to me that, if you look at an NFL quarterback roster, the ideal thing is your guy who you drafted, then maybe, you have somebody who was, if you look at the Steelers right now, they've got Kenny Pickett, who they drafted. They got Mitch Trubisky, who was a high draft pick, another place that didn't work out, but could be a serviceable backup. And then you've got your third stringer. In college, it seems to me, and Baylor has this situation, A&M has this situation, and many others, that you have, somebody you recruited and developed, a transfer from somewhere else who has starting experience, and then the prospect coming up, the younger guy. Do you see that being kind of consistent, what they want, teams want out of their quarterback rosters?
Yeah, I can see that. I think, in Baylor's situation right now, they just basically have Chapin and Drones are the only scholarship guys, but they were able to go out and get Luke Anthony, who is clearly a scholarship guy, but he's walking on at Baylor right now. So they kind of have followed that trend. But you kind of look around and there's a lot of schools that just have guys who they've recruited as well. And they haven't gone out and added any transfers or anything like that. I think what Baylor wants really is to have at least 3 quarterbacks on scholarship in their depth chart. I think that's the ideal goal that they're looking for. So for instance, next year, Luke Anthony will be gone and you'll have Blake Chapin, Kyron Drones, and Austin Novosad. And that'll be Chapin's technically second year being a full-time starter. And I think that's a great situation for Austin in particular, because Baylor definitely would rather their true freshman quarterback is able to redshirt their first year. And I know Austin, obviously he wants to come in and compete and play potentially early, but I also know it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if he sat 1 year and got his body right, got the playbook down and everything like that. Because honestly, when you are thrown into the fire as a true freshman, sometimes it really can affect quarterbacks. We've seen that so many times, that quarterback is such a confident position. You've got to be confident in order to play the position. So if you're thrown into the fire and things don't go well, like a guy you mentioned, Mitch Trubisky, I mean, it can really set your career back. So, yeah, I think ideally you want something along those lines, Paul, but I think 3 scholarship quarterbacks is kind of the pinpoint spot you want to be. And if you have 4, you're very, very lucky in this day and age.
So if they're at 18 right now, and Novosad's obviously, could go either way, but either way, they're close to 20. You just said a few minutes ago that, you're expecting them to be around 20 here pretty soon. Where are they as far as that 2023 class? If, let's say, here by Big 12 Media Days, they're at like 2021. I mean, how much room we talking? How much are they just going to have to play defense in terms of this class now for the next few months until they can actually sign these guys?
Yeah, they're going to be playing a lot of defense, Craig. You're exactly right. I mean, they already have 18 committed. I do think they'll probably push 20, 21 by the end of the month. And when you're at that point, there's really only a few spots left. I've kind of readjusted things. I'm starting to believe that they might be able to get to 25 in this class. I mean, if you look at what they've done, they offered a punter the other day. So they're looking to add a special teams guy, which clearly means they have, an extra spot available. You see how many guys they're after right now. So, yeah, I mean, I think they could get a little bit closer to 25 than I was originally expecting. Which definitely means there's probably going to be some attrition before next fall comes, which, I mean, that happens everywhere. So, yeah, I agree with you. I do think they're going to be playing a lot of defense. They're going to get close to filling up this class. And that is kind of tough, because you go into these guys' senior years and you don't have a lot of spots available if there's some risers late in the process, which, that's just kind of what you got to pick and choose in recruiting. You got to choose whether you want to load up early or if you want to wait till the back end. And I think right now Baylor wanted to load up in June and then in the back end try to close on a couple of guys, kind of like they did with a guy like Armani Winfield last year.
We have Tompkins coming up today at 4:45 in an hour. Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365 Radio, who's been all over the recruitments, the commitments, the visits, and maybe the crystal ball, so to speak, although I don't like using that term, of what might be next. We knew that UT would get a bounce. It may be a huge bounce after the commitment by Arch Manning. They picked up 4 offensive linemen and also a wide receiver. I believe it was yesterday. One of them was Chapman, the kid from Harker Heights, who Baylor was obviously interested in. Were they interested in any others of the offensive linemen who committed?
No, they were not interested in any of the offensive linemen that committed to Texas yesterday. And even Jaden Chapman back in March, when I saw him at the Under Armour camp, Baylor had already moved on from him, and they weren't really in communication. So, I mean, Baylor recruited him early, but then stopped after that. So, yeah, I mean, none of these are really a loss for Baylor. And honestly, it was kind of interesting. Chapman's a good one, but, if you kind of compare what Texas has done on the offensive line with what Baylor's done on the offensive line, yeah, I'm taking Baylor's recruiting class on the offensive line every day of the week. They've really, I don't even think it's really all that close, to be honest.
Grayson, thank you, man. Appreciate your time. Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365 Radio, 365 Sports recruiting analyst, lead recruiting analyst for us. And